Welcome to Road to Recovery.
Hello and welcome to Road to Recovery with Sagi Shaked. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today we are going to talk about liability in truck accident cases. We're going to try to talk about who's at fault. Sagi, always great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin. Look forward to it today.
All right, so what parties are typically involved in determining liability in truck accident cases?
So when you have a truck accident case, there's a lot of different parties that we can look to. First one, obviously, is the trucking company and the truck driver. But then we also have, if it's a different motor carrier, you would have that as well. Potentially, you would have the shipping company, also the broker company. And then it depends on who the trucking company is, because every trucking company tries to, create different ways on how to avoid liability. So sometimes you have a joint venture where you have companies, for example, like Amazon, where they create different types of entities as if it's not them, so they can avoid liability. FedEx has their own way of doing it. UPS has their own way of doing it. So it really depends on the company. So I would look for, one, the truck driver, two, the trucking company. There's the trailer portion. Did they not properly load the vehicle? There's the broker involved. So there's a bunch of different entities to look at. We just don't know at the beginning, but we look into everything to make sure we're, dotting our I's, crossing our T's, and getting full justice for the people involved in those collisions.
There's something I've heard called vicarious liability. Can you kind of explain the concept of that and how it applies to trucking companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So vicarious liability, what that means in the trucking setting is you're vicariously liable for your employees. So it's sort of the employee-employer relationship. Now, what trucking companies like to do, they like to create what they call an independent contractor relationship, which means, hey, I'm not responsible. He's an independent contractor or she's an independent contractor. That's all fine and well. You can do that. The problem is for them, for the trucking companies, the law doesn't allow that. The law recognizes that if they're in your truck, as in you're a motor carrier, then you're on the hook. You can say you're an independent contractor, meaning that the employee is an independent contractor. You can even have a nice fancy contract that the employment is an independent contractor and you're not our employee and we only pay you per hour that you drive or per location from one destination to another. It doesn't matter. There's something called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. And those regulations are basically, it's the federal government came up with these laws. It's called the Code of Federal Regulations. The subset of it is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. And they say that there's no such thing as an independent contractor, even if you're trying to circumvent that to avoid liability, which is what these companies do. It's not going to work. The regulations talk about that you can't have that in place. They still try to do it. They still, have their defense lawyers fight this issue. There's some case law on it. You get stuck with that issue, let me know. I've dealt with it plenty of times.
That's funny. When I first read that, I was like, I wonder if it's like living vicariously through your children. And it kind of is. Like, it's not that far off, is it?
Right. Yeah. But they're still on the hook. I mean, your employee, you put them on the road, you put them in this 80,000-pound vehicle. You've got to do, as an employer, as a carrier, you've got to do your due diligence, make sure that person should be driving. You got to look at their history. You got to look at, do they have substance abuse problems? Do they have alcohol problems? Do they have sleep apnea issues? And we had a trucking company. I took the corporate representative's deposition for the trucking company. And I asked them, well, how did you find your driver? And he put an ad on Craigslist to find his driver, as opposed to, going through the trucking schools that teach people how to drive. He didn't even know where he found his truck driver, and he didn't have the required background information on his truck driver. And sure enough, the truck driver caused a fatality. And, unfortunately, people's lives get changed, every day because of these, truck drivers and trucking companies that are not doing what they're supposed to do. And again, I'm not saying all of them are like that, but there is a percentage, and it's too high right now because too many people are on the roadways dying and getting really hurt from trucking accidents.
What role does the truck driver logbook play in determining fault?
Yeah, the logbook is really interesting. So I'd say about 10 years ago, they switched from being handwritten logbooks to now electronically recorded logbooks. So in the old days, you would have people, and we still have some active cases, believe it or not, that are still going on with the good old handwritten logbooks, but they're just about at their end stage.
Mhm.
But now you have the logbooks, they're all electronic. So every time that you get on the road as a truck driver, you have to record it. Why? Because there's hours of service where they're not allowed to drive a certain amount of hours. And if they go over those hours, they can get fined. They can get their licenses taken away. The motor carrier, which is the trucking company, they can also get fined. So occasionally, if they get stopped by highway patrol or by an officer, they can ask them for their logbooks and check into it. Now, when someone gets into a crash, we're always looking at those logbooks. So you asked how it plays into these cases. We want to know, how long have they been driving? And sometimes they get kind of sneaky, like they used to do in the old days. They'd have 3 sets of logbooks, one logbooks for their company, one logbooks for the police, and then one logbooks to really know how many hours they drove. Now we have technology, so we can find out, if their logbooks are accurate. For example, you can look at every stop they've made and how long it would take a person to drive from point A to point B, going, let's say, 55 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour. And if they got there too fast, then something's a problem, because before they, start their car, they have to do, or start their truck, they have to do a pre-trip inspection. And that's when you start your logbooks, you start running, you start to count. You don't start to count the second you start driving. You start to count when you do your pre-trip inspection. So how long did the pre-trip inspection last? We had a case where a tire flew off one of the trailers. Had they done their pre-trip inspection, they would have found that out. But we knew in that case, they didn't do it. And so the logbooks play an important role. It tells us if the person is fatigued, if they're driving too much, maybe the motor carrier is overworking them. So the logbooks play a critical role in these cases. So if you have one of these cases, make sure you have the motor carrier and the truck driver preserve their driver logs immediately, because after 6 months, they don't have to preserve them. So if you send them a letter immediately to preserve the logs, they have to do it. Now, if they don't do it, they don't preserve the logs, it's something called spoilation of evidence, meaning you spoiled the evidence. Now you've got to pay the price. You destroyed evidence. You've got to pay the price. You can't come in and say you weren't fatigued because you spoiled the evidence. So you would get, a judge would give an instruction if you're going to trial that would say the defendant had in their possession the motor carrier logs. They destroyed them, and you can presume that it was beneficial to the plaintiff, and that's why they destroyed them. I'm giving you the layman's terms for that.
Sure.
That's why you want to do it. So if you have a trucking case and you want a copy of our preservation letter, which is many pages long, we'll give it to you. But remember, you really have to tailor it to your specific case. We'll give you the boilerplate that we use, but every case is specific, and you want to make sure you boilerplate that preservation letter immediately. Make sure it goes out by certified mail, so you have proof that they got it, because a lot of times if they got it, they'll say they never got it. So you want to make sure the trucking company's getting it, the insurance company's getting it, the truck driver's getting it. You don't want anyone to claim it was the other person. So you send those letters out. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll gladly help you or walk you through what you need to do.
So with technology advancing in the logbooks, you'd think there should be more accountability or more accurate accountability. Are you seeing better results in cases and stuff like that because of the technology?
Well, the technology helps keep them honest. Plus, so that when you ask about logbooks and technology, the technology does. So Qualcomm has technology, and some other companies have technology where we're able to see exactly what's going on. Now you also have some, there's new technology for example, for rear end collisions, you're going to see the automatic emergency braking system come into play. So that technology helps out. But with logbooks, going back to that, the technology, I don't know if it's minimized accidents, but it's helped us prove up accidents when they're saying that they weren't tired, they weren't fatigued, that they didn't drive a certain amount of hours, or they didn't go over their hours. Even though they have the logbooks and they're not supposed to go over their hours, they still do. And that's something on the motor carrier to, they have to enforce the law. They're the ones who are getting a DOT number, which is a Department of Transportation number. And then that Department of Transportation gives them what they call an MC number. That's a motor carrier number. They have to enforce those laws. You can't just put people on the road and allow all these, drivers to cause injuries. So if they're not enforcing it, they're going to be on the hook, not just the truck driver. That's where you go back to your question from earlier about vicarious liability.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if maybe because the truck drivers are like, oh, I better, now that it's digital, I can't fudge these anymore. So I better pull over and get some rest, when maybe they wouldn't have before. But it sounds like maybe you're not quite seeing that quite yet.
Well, the responsible truck drivers are doing that.
Yeah, they've
Like I
always
said, not all of them are bad,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there are some bad apples, like in every industry.
How can truck maintenance records be used as evidence to establish liability? You touched on that a little bit before with your example of the pre-trip check. Are there other situations where those can be used?
Yeah, so the maintenance record, so the pre-trip is beyond important, right? Every 150 miles, they should be checking their truck, checking their tires.
Every 150 miles, that's good.
Yeah, it's important again, and these rules are meant to, create safety on the roadway, so people don't get hurt, so people don't experience what some of my clients have experienced, and their families have, been, destroyed as a result of companies not enforcing the law, not requiring their drivers to do these pre-trip inspections or the maintenance checks. If a driver is complaining to a company he's having problems with his truck or her truck, the company should do the maintenance checks. They shouldn't put them on the road to cause other people to get injured. So maintenance is a huge component of these cases. We see that happening, all too often, whether it's the logbooks, the maintenance, it just happens. And so that's part of our preservation letter that you should have in there. Maintenance logs, that should be in your preservation letter as well.
Since there's multiple people involved here, or multiple parties involved, I should say, whether it's the driver, the trucking company, any middlemen, can multiple parties be held responsible for an accident?
When you look at a truck case, we're looking at potentially the truck driver, we said, the trucking company, the company who maintained the truck. If it's different than the trucking company, because sometimes the trucking company doesn't have their own repair shop. A lot of times, and we're seeing this right now in 2 trucking cases, where I just spoke about it a second ago, the automatic emergency braking system. So right now, the law doesn't require them in trucks. They are in cars. But starting in 2026, the federal law takes place where every car and every truck is going to be required to have the automatic emergency braking system. So if you noticed, if you're driving a relatively new car, I guess a car dated in the last 5 to 7 years, you'll notice that if you're driving, the car sometimes might come to a stop if it senses there's a pedestrian or a car ahead. That's the technology that's put in there. It's meant to prevent crashes, and we're hoping that that does prevent crashes. And some of these devices, this software, can alert the drivers and stop the vehicles, whether it's a truck or a car, up to 65, 75 miles an hour. So we have a case right now where an individual is outside, he's got a flat tire, moves his car to the side of the road in the turn lane, and he's going to the back of his trunk to get a spare tire. And as he's getting a spare tire, another vehicle comes and smashes him into, like, literally into the truck of the car. And unfortunately for him, he went to the hospital, and within 2 days, after 4 surgeries, they weren't able to save his legs. So he had amputations above the legs. The vehicle that smashed into him had the AEB system in it. So, and the AEB is the automatic emergency braking. Had that system worked properly, this man would have been alive. He's still alive, but this man would have been alive and have his legs, and they wouldn't have been amputated. But because that's what that system is meant to do. So maintenance, going back to maintenance helps. Another possible avenue for parties, again, is these defective products that we're seeing happening with truck accident cases.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it's a sad case.
Yeah. Oh God, that's tough. Accident reconstruction experts is kind of an interesting job. How do they contribute to proving fault in truck accident cases?
So here's why, when you say accident reconstruction experts, here's why you need a trucking lawyer as soon as you get into a crash or an accident. Because the second a crash or an accident occurs, the insurance company is hiring an accident reconstruction expert. So you need to have someone on your side immediately go out to the scene, not waste time, because they have the first phone call that truck driver makes before they call 911 is they're calling the trucking company. They have a hotline. It's a risk management company. They get out there. They're accident reconstruction experts. They're photographers. They're human factors experts. They're investigators immediately. So before calling 911, think about that for a second. So as these accident reconstruction experts, they're not coming out there to help you. They're coming out there to protect that motor carrier or that trucking company's money.
Right.
That's what they're there to do. They're not there for anything else. So if there's favorable evidence for you, they're not looking for that. They're looking for stuff that's favorable to them. That may miss their camera. That may miss their video if it's favorable to you. They're doing that for a reason. Why? They're protecting the trucking company's money. They know what they're getting hired for. There's a purpose they're hired for, and that's to protect the money. So it's super important, ultra important for you to hire someone sooner rather than later. And I'm not just talking about anyone, someone who is a board certified civil trial attorney, someone who's had trucking cases, someone who handles trucking cases on a daily basis so they can come out there and protect you with the right experts, locking down the scene, making sure everything is there that should be there, taking pictures of everything, not just beneficial to one side, but making sure it's all there so you can show, hey, this accident reconstruction expert that we hired looked at the entire scene, didn't just take favorable pictures and videos from one point of view. They look at it from both points of view. So it's super important to get one involved right away. Do not wait. Do not wait to hire a lawyer. You need to hire a lawyer right away because the defense has hired their team. They have them in place all over the country.
Yeah, that's such an important thing to say. I mean, it's easy for us on this podcast to be like, you should hire a lawyer, but man, there's so many moving parts going on here. Like if I was in a trucking case, I wouldn't know where to look for an accident reconstruction expert and all this other stuff. So yeah, representing myself sounds just terrifying and a bit like a bad idea.
Yeah, horrible mistake. And look, it's a pain in the butt to deal with insurance companies. We do it on an everyday basis. And I can tell you when I was involved in an accident, it was a pain in the butt. Personally, I mean, I had my team here help me, but it was a pain in the butt to get those phone calls and to deal with it. And if I didn't know what to do, I could see how people can get lost with the amount of emails, letters, dealing with the portals, the insurance company portals. That's why you need someone to help you not only get through the process, but to protect your rights, to protect your claims, to get the right experts involved, such as an accident reconstruction expert, or maybe a trucking expert, someone to deal with the logbooks, or someone to deal with, for example, if we have the automatic emergency braking system, a defect there, you need an expert with that. So there's all different types of experts that need to be employed right away without hesitation to protect the case.
Agreed. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Road to Recovery with experienced attorney Sagi Shaked. To connect with Sagi, please visit shakedlaw.com and be sure to like and subscribe the channel. Sagi, always great to see you. Thanks for all the info.
Likewise.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.